Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fall and Fallow Heart Pod. Fall and Fallow is a horticultural community where users share their experiences. Our aim is to combat plant blindness in everyone, everywhere, and to achieve this by engaging everyone on every level. Visit our website fallandfallow.com, where you can get some great ideas on how you can help with this mission. Today's HortPod will be a round table discussion, and the topic on the discussion is my immigrant garden. My guests today are CJ and children's book author WR, who I've invited to join me to explore this some more. A little over 13% of this country's population is made up of immigrants, so I think that there are many immigrant gardens around. Hello, guys.
Hi, Ro.
Okay.
I wanted to talk today about the immigrant garden because it is something many of us have in common. We're all immigrants to this country. CJ, where did you migrate from?
I immigrated from the Caribbean, specifically Guyana, and I immigrated here to New York.
Thank you. And you, Welwyn?
Pretty much the same. I came from Guyana and I moved to New York.
Thank you. I also migrated to this country, and I've seen that when people migrate to a new country, they assimilate into the new culture, but still have their traditional beliefs and traditional ways of doing things. Has that been your experience? And we will start with Welwyn. Could you tell us a little about your experience as a migrant?
Sure, definitely. Well, for one, the weather is different. You don't really have four seasons in Guyana. There is a wet and dry season, and that's pretty much it. So it allows you to spend a lot of time outdoors almost year round. In New York and in the US, there is really a limitation on enjoying warm weather year round, and that sometimes curtail your activities if you are not a person who spends a lot of time in the snow. So definitely that's the biggest difference.
Thank you. Have you noticed anything else, for example, that's different? For example, the music you grew up with.
No, the music is universal, and because of the number of immigrants have grown, I can get almost the same music that I used to listen to in Guyana. The only difference is the music that is played is not widespread now. It doesn't cover all the different types of music, be it classic, non-traditional. In Guyana, I was much more exposed to that, and here it's very focused on what's the latest song, what's the most popular song. You'll hear that over and over. So that's a big difference.
Thank you. CJ, do you still do some things the same way that you did back home?
Yes, I do. One of the main things I do the same that I did back home is I start my day early and I finish my day early. By that I mean I wake up early and I do what I have to do. I eat my lunch at the same time. I have breakfast at the same time. I try to eat my dinner at the same time. And, I finish my day um, by about 7. And what I notice here is that they eat dinner at a later time. So dinner time over here, I find, is sometimes about 5, 6 o'clock. And that I try to avoid. The other things I do the same over here are I cook a lot of the same foods that I did in Guyana. So I eat a lot of fresh green and yellow vegetables. I try to stay away from the soda and the juices. Um, and I try to eat as healthy of what they call organic food over here. I try to eat as much as that in order to stay healthy.
Thank you, CJ. For me, I see this playing out in the way people speak, their accent and the language. The grandparents and parents who migrated continue to speak their traditional language in the new land. Their children will sometimes speak both languages, but the grandchildren who are born in the new land will only speak that language. Sometimes they forget all about, let's say, the mother tongue, to put it simply. We will take a short break, and when we return, we will talk about how this is seen in the way we garden. Welcome back, everyone. Today's Heart Pod is a roundtable discussion, and the topic on the discussion is My Immigrant Garden. My guests today are CJ and children's book author WR. CJ, we touched briefly on the gardening you did back home in the Caribbean. Can you tell us some more about that?
Yes, certainly. What I'm doing in my garden to remind me of my garden in the Caribbean is we planted a lot of fruits, vegetables, and flowers. Some of the fruits we planted were bananas, papaya, watermelon, guava, sorrel, and pineapple. And some of the vegetables we planted were tomatoes, squash, cucumber, lettuce, corn, sugarcane, peppers, and cabbage.
Thank you, that's great. How much of that are you able to do here?
Well, because these plants grow in warm climates, I'm unable to plant some of them in my garden in New York. However, we have a raised garden bed, and in it we have planted lettuce, herbs such as basil and cantaloupe, and I hope to add to that cabbage, echalot, cucumber, and tomatoes.
Okay, is there anything else in your garden that reminds you of home?
In my garden, to remind me of home, I have also planted some perennial flowers, such as black eyed Susan, daisies, ivies, and ferns. And these will come back every year, so I do not have to keep replanting them.
Thank you, CJ. Welwyn, this question is for you. Do you do anything in your garden that reminds you of home?
Well, what I want to say before I answer that question is that immigration and migrants have certainly expanded the way gardening is done in this country now. 30 years ago, no one focused on things like okra, um, certain types of callaloo, bora, certain types of squash. And now you can see many gardens, and you can even go to your local home depot or your nursery and buy these plants in some of the boroughs like Queens, which has a heavy immigrant population. You don't have to look very far or very hard to find these local plants that you grew up in the Caribbean planting. So I do think that the awareness of all types of nutritional plants that are really not so traditional to the US, they have found their way and they thrive in this country. So we, myself and my family, have only decided to venture out into growing a garden starting last year. And we have definitely found some of the traditional plants. Okra, we've tried to plant that this year. But there are little techniques like callaloo. Callaloo can grow directly from the stem, and you don't necessarily have to plant the seeds. So we are experimenting with just taking the used callaloo stems and putting them into the earth and watch them grow again, regenerate. So those are some of the things that we have traveled from Guyana with that knowledge in our head, and we're trying to see how they work over here. One other main difference is the type of manure or fertilizer that that we use back in Guyana and what is used here. So in Guyana, we have access to a lot of the plant, a lot of the animal manure, which is very natural, organic, and we use that to fertilize the plants. And here, you kind of would go to your local Home Depot and buy some kind of chemical mix, which would have the same effect, but it's not organic, at least not 100% organic. Well, to my surprise, I did find at my local Home Depot that they were selling the manure, and it was way cheaper than the synthetic uh, fertilizer. So we are now trying that, and if it works and the plants really thrive, then that would be a very, very important technique that we can use to use the natural organic manure to really fertilize the plants and make them thrive. So, to summarize, what I've seen is that a lot of the plants we grew up with in Guyana are now being sold right here in this country. And it's due to the awareness being raised by migration. So, and it is sustainable because you can find them at pretty large scale nurseries or even your local Home Depot. Um, and that's a pleasure to see.
Thank you, WR. It is gratifying when you can find things that you are accustomed to and be able to replicate them where you are. And it was interesting to me that you mentioned the crop, callaloo, because as a teenager, I started a vegetable garden to supplement my family's food supply. And that was the crop that I started with. I planted callaloo, tomatoes, pumpkin, squash, okra, and eggplant. But of them all, callaloo was my favorite crop to grow because it was easy. After you harvested the leaves, you could stick the stalks back into the soil, and within a few weeks, another crop would come in. So after reaping those leaves, I would again replant the stalks and get another crop before the stalks stopped producing. When I reaped my crop of callaloo, I would take it to my mother, who made the most wonderful dishes. So growing up, I had a lot of callaloo because my mom was a good cook, and I absolutely loved the callaloo dishes that she made. Here, I have not been able to find the variety of callaloo that we have in my country, but I would love to see what you have found in your travels. Home, another practice that I had was that I would also just randomly throw pumpkin seeds and squash seeds, and they would take root and grow into some very vigorous vines that produced fruit. And that was always a lot of fun to see the fruits of your labor, so to speak. On this note, we will take our final break. Welcome back, everyone. Today's Heart Pod is a roundtable discussion, and the topic on the discussion is my immigrant garden. My guests today are CJ and children's book author W.R. I must say that this conversation brought back some good memories for me, and I hope it did the same for you. Our gardens can connect us with the past and with the present. But just a word of caution, it is illegal to move plants across borders because new plants may compete with native plants and can have ecological ramifications. For example, they can become invasive, and some people may not realize this. So always check with the relevant authorities to find out if you need a permit. CJ and WR, I want to thank you both for being my guests on today's Heart Pod. To all my listeners out there, if you enjoyed this Heart Pod, please tune in next week for another episode. I welcome your feedback, so please visit our website, fallandfallow.com, to take part in the survey and to answer a few questions. Until next time, remember nature's oath: love nature, and nature will love you back. Bye bye.